welcome to Mind Brain Movies. I'm your Sherpa into the Mind Brain Hope. And apparently, my brain is turned off today because a little behind the scenes here, folks. We started recording, but I didn't hit the record button. So, yay. I'm such a great hostess. And what's worse is I'm trying to impress our guest here today and it's not working. So he might be nice, but in the background, he's probably like, "Oh gosh, what did I sign up for?"
Never coming back again.
Right? He's like, "Friendship over." Uh, but today we have my co-host, as per usual, Boone,
Hi, everybody.
and we have Dr. Sanchez, Dr. Gremlin, Liz, whoever you want to call her. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
that's you. Yes, you.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking, I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, you could call me like Dr. Sanchez or Dr. Visu or Dr. Grimlin, but I'm like, but I might not respond because I'm still not used to people calling me doctor. And yeah, clearly.
So Liz or Gremlin, got it.
Yeah.
And we have our guest today, Bill Kimberlin. So I saw Bill the other day at a local shop that I go to. He was doing a talk on his specialty, and here I have the book that he was talking about. So Watch Me Die, and it's signed Hey. And then um, when I went there, I was so much more than I was expecting, and I know before even the talk, I like messaged the girls. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna ask him. He's gonna be on the show. I'm gonna manifest it. It's gonna happen. And I get up there and I'm like, how did that be on my show? And I like throw one of my stickers at him and I'm like, just do the thing, please. And thankfully he said
You
yes.
started
And that
crying.
right.
It was
Please, yeah.
sad.
Now, uh, and thankfully it worked because now we have Bill Kimberlin here today. Um, And now I know this is take 2 of, me asking your intro to yourself. Um, so, uh, if you wanna maybe you could do a shortened version, you could do a long version, whatever you like, because I know I already got you talking, so you could just be
No,
like, "Hi."
no, you're fine. First of all, it's an honor to be on here. So thank you to all three of you for having me. Like you said, my name is Bill Kimberlin, and I've been in Florida a little over 3 years now. I'm transplanted from Ohio, where all of this originated from with the death row and the death process. I was a professor up there at a local university in Ohio, and background of myself, education wise, is I have criminal justice and sociology bachelor's degrees. I have a master's degree in counseling, and then my doctorate's in psychology. So, uh, teaching throughout the years, I never wanted to be the type that would teach book smarts only. So, the hottest debatable topics back then are the same ones that we see today, the legalization of drugs, abortion rights, gun rights, and of course, capital punishment. And the other three topics I was well versed in, from growing up hunting all my life to traveling to different countries and things of that sort. But what I did not know a lot about was the execution process or death row in general. So when I looked into it, I saw that it was very non transparent. And I thought, well, I'm going to, pull some of the cards I have in my back pocket out. Being friends with a lot of people, my best friend's a judge in Ohio, and I have quite a few of them. And so I thought, well, what do I need to do to get on death row? So I got the contact information to the attorney generals at the time. I called, told them I needed to be put in the lottery or whatever to go to an execution or to go to death row or whatever, and they hung up on me. And I thought, well, that was pretty freaking rude. So I called back and I explained to them, I don't think you understand. And they were like, I don't think you understand, and which I didn't. They explained to me that the Ohio Revised Code dictates who can attend executions, who's allowed to go on to death row, things of that nature. So they felt sorry for me. They said they had never had that question asked to them before. But since I was willing to ask the questions, they would send me the Ohio Revised Code and the list of everybody that was scheduled to die in Ohio over the next couple years. If I could find any loopholes, have at it. So they did. I did. Went to death row, which I said was going to be once or twice. That was 20 years ago, and I haven't stopped. So, It has since went from Ohio's death row to all over the country, from male inmates to male and female inmates. One inmate who I witnessed his execution wanted, who was trans and wanted to have the surgery, but did not, was not successful in that before he was executed. Yeah, so it has been a journey, one that I never in my entire life thought I would be on. Certainly not a rabbit hole I ever intended on going down. Uh, but when I found out I was one of the only ones doing it, it became like a niche. And fast forward to today, and here I am. So
I've question. I've question. I want to first. So would you? I'm sorry. Would you recommend if somebody is interested in sort of like following the same path as your
no.
career? Would that work
Just
these
no.
days? I just don't do it. Don't even think about it.
So I get that question a lot, and I'll be perfectly honest. If I went back in time and knew then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have even went down this path. You have to understand that it takes a considerable amount of time, a lot of patience, and you give up a lot of your own, I don't want to say freedoms, but security when you are dealing with these individuals on death row. So, for instance, I have a post office box where they send tons of letters and art and everything else to, but they know everything about me. They know where I live, they know where my kids went to school, they know where they live right now. They know every single thing because they'll ask me these questions. And before they ever ask these questions, they already know the answers too. So if I am going to death row and I get to eat with them, drink with them, walk around with them, so there's no handcuffs, there's no shackles, there's no anything other than in San Quentin where they lock you in the cage with them. When you are walking around that, you have to build a certain amount of rapport and a lot of trust, which is very hard to do on the inside or the out. So they have told me numerous times that the guards will let anyone in on death row. They determine if you get to go home or not. Their house, their rules. So I play by their rules. And knowing that not everybody is sentenced to prison to death or life without, they always have people on the outside. They always have people
Yeah.
monitoring your social media. They always have people knowing everything about you. And so they'll send certain paintings of my daughter's favorite singer or my son's mascot from his school or my wife where she taught. They'll send stuff right to my home just to give you a little nudge to let you know we already know, no need to
Mhm.
ask. So that's why I cringe sometimes when I see all these individuals out there that want to be pen pals, so to speak, with all these death row inmates or serial killers and things like that. I don't think they realize what they're getting themselves into, especially
Mm.
when they open themselves up to whatever could happen later on. So if that
Well, I
answers
mean,
your question,
especially if it's they're doing this as a side hobby, not necessarily as a trained professional.
it's yes. I don't even know how you could really be a professional in the field that I'm in because the professionalism goes out the door when I walk through the gates of death row. Uh, Simply because they don't want to see me as a doctor. They want
Right.
to see
Hmm.
me as somebody that is not going to talk down to them, not going to judge them, and is certainly not going to try to pry information out of them that they're not ready to divulge yet.
Hmm.
So that's why sometimes it takes years and years and years to develop that rapport with them, and you have to be in it for the long haul. It's not like like for instance, that Chad Daybell who was just sentenced to death yesterday out of I believe Idaho. It's not like next week I'll correspond with him and write with him and say, hey, why'd you do it, and tell me all about it. It doesn't work that way at all. Now there'll be a lot of people that will write to him just because they're hoping that he will send a letter back to them with a signature, and
Yeah.
then they will sell that because there's a lot of money to be made on death row. But I've never sold a single piece of art, and I have well over probably 3,000 pieces laying around. I've never sold a single letter. I've never sold anything, and that's gotten me a lot more respect on death row. That's not to say that eventually I won't dump it all because I have no desire to keep it. But if I were to sell it, then that jeopardizes my security going into the prison if they even allow me to come back to those prisons because you really shouldn't be profiting off of these individuals.
All right. Liz, I see your brain turning again. Do you have another question, or are Boone
Feel
and I allowed
free.
to speak?
No, no, no. This is my interview. Sorry.
Okay.
No, because I was looking at my questions, trying to figure out if it went on theme because they're kind of like scattered. Um, but my other question is, since I kind of brought it up, like people who are enthusiastic about learning all about crime and
Yes.
serial killers and stuff. It has become quite a popular thing to do these days. I think. What Given all the experience that you have so far, what do you wish these people knew about actually corresponding with people, or like what it's like to actually have a conversation with them?
I think if people could come to the realization and understanding that uh, these individuals on death row have absolutely nothing to lose, but they are very manipulative, and in most circumstances, they are very well educated when it comes to manipulation. They may not have the
Mhm.
educational degrees, but they could go in with a GED, but within no time at all have a PhD when it comes to criminal minds and justice and everything else. So they're well versed in the law. They're well versed on the inside. So um, I wish people would understand that no matter how smart you think you are, that every single thing that you do with these individuals on death row is like a game of chess. Every move is a game of chess. And when you start out, you're really nothing but a pawn to them. And
Yeah.
it takes a very, very long time to work up the ranks to become that knight or that bishop or that rook or whatever you want to call it. And you have to do that by leading by example and showing them that you trust what they say and they can trust what you say is true and what is fact, um, and that you don't lie to them and that you just respect them for where they are because again it's not like you see on TV. Whenever we go to film the stuff that we're working on right now, eventually you'll see it on TV where they're behind glass or they're shackled and chained and everything else. And that's for the viewer's purpose, not, in reality. The reality is I'm sitting right at the table with them eating and drinking. We're up walking around. We're going to the canteen. We're getting our pictures taken. We can play cards. We can do whatever. And here in Florida, there's 25 inmates all at one time. There may be
Mhm.
one guard. So you have 25 death row inmates who are looking at death no matter what they do. So they have nothing to lose. So you have to, your head has to be on a swivel. You have to be very conscientious of what you're going to say ahead of time and what you're going to do. The counseling degree that I received, I think, helped me with the listening aspect because the least amount of questions I ask them, the more they tell me. The psychology degree taught me more how to not show any type of emotion. So as I sit across from them and they explain to me how they killed 5, 10, 20, 50, 90 people, whatever, raped them, going back necrophiliac, everything. Um, I sit there and act like it's another day in the park and that I'm not there to for them to impress me with the murders and the body count. I'm just there to
Mhm.
learn. So they may start telling me about the murders that they've done or the children that they've raped and killed and everything else, and I'll switch topics to the politics or the weather or anything like that just to throw them off. So,
Mhm.
but make no mistake about it. As much as I prepare for every interview that I go in there with, as much as I've dealt with them over the years, I never once think that I'm two steps ahead of them. So,
Yeah, it sounds like it's like a really tricky game that it's always I feel like that type of deal where you'll watch like a reality show and you're like, "Oh, well I can go on and do that." But then once they're there in the situation, they're like, "Oh, no. I can't
right,
do that."
very
So
much,
like,
yeah. And there's
yeah.
so many fine lines I have to walk
Mhm.
um, for my own purpose, because again, I'm dealing with some of the worst of the worst. Some are high profile, some nobody's ever heard of before. Um, but you have to keep reminding yourself that there are a lot of families out there that have lost loved ones, and I don't really deal with the families. Even though I may be, trauma informed education and everything else, I've already crossed a line for those victims' families by spending time with the ones that have taken the lives of their loved ones. So I'm already behind the eight ball against them already. So it's a very fine line. Just like when I do get rid of the art in the letters at some point, there's going to be a certain segment of the population that's going to be upset with me because of the fact that I have so-called profited from these individuals.
Right.
So I have to figure out when the right time is to cut everything off. And it's that's a struggle. That's something that I deal with on a daily basis, just like getting desensitized to it all. Those
Mm-hmm.
are internal struggles that I still have to deal with myself on days.
Okay,
Booney.
I'm done.
Booney,
Hi.
I know you have a bunch of questions because so we have Dr. Kremlin down here. I'm like the middle ground, and then Boone's like, I have Excel spreadsheets full of what I'm gonna say. So like,
But
Okay, so first comment is I like doing book reviews, and the first thing I tend to do is I like to comment on the structure of the content. So
mhm,
I really appreciate how conversational your book was. It kind of parallels with I think how you've approached being a professional or unprofessional person in the prison system. You've
correct.
kind of So systemically, you've seen that there's these perspectives of what authority and power do to people, right? And so you coming in and having this voice of just casualness, respecting people, like being able to think critically. So when you said that in the beginning of your book, I got really excited because I'm all for critical thinking. You present the information in a way where people have the capacity to think on their own. And like you're not presenting an agenda. That's the thing I think people are missing when you're trying to come from a place of psychology, right? Or whatever, dissecting some type of system. People feel less defensive when you tell them in the beginning, you're so capable. I'm just presenting what I've experienced. Here's the stories. You are so smart enough to figure it out on your own. Now what's the next step? So I really appreciate that you presented it in that way because sometimes when I read psychology things, it's very biased and skewed from the stance of authority and prestige, which doesn't make people feel like they're welcome to consume it. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I was about to say Booney lit up real quick.
Well, for
So
me, it's like
yeah,
always about knowledge, but also empowerment, right? So my passion's the
right,
education system. Yours is like learning and delving into prison systems. For me, they're so similar. It's like there's things that people don't see, and I
right.
again, you went in a way of like, here's me pulling in the information on behalf of society. So the things that you're doing and
Right.
the questions that you're asking, I love how open ended you are about these things. So like again, very journalistic the way you did it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be honest with you. I have set out from the very beginning never to join one side or the other, pro uh, death penalty or against death penalty. My job, I believe, anyways, as education academic in psychology, is to present what I know and allow the reader or whomever is researching the stuff that I've done to make their own informed decision. You can't sit there and say, I'm for the death penalty or against the death penalty and not know anything about it. I'm also not the type to say, listen, these are the facts, and the facts are as stated in my book, so therefore
Mm-hmm.
draw your own conclusions. What I'm saying is you question everything. Question me. I'm fine with it. Take my findings that I have reported from death row, the ones I'm still working on now. Rip them apart if you want. It's not that I have anything to prove. I'm not trying to prove right or wrong. I'm just disseminating the information firsthand that I've witnessed firsthand and witnessed the executions firsthand with my own eyes and everything else. And I can only tell you what I have seen, and then you take it from there and develop an educated opinion, not just an opinion. That's how I have approached this.
And yeah, and that's good because I do agree with Boone because a lot of the times I, I think one of the things I do not like about psychology as a field is that there i- if you want to learn more about psychology or more about whatever you're struggling with, um, there is so much information out there, but it's all in articles behind a
Like
paywall. it
academia, yeah.
it's all very a lot. It's really hard to read even for me, and I like I've gotten my, not that it really does anything, because I still struggle to understand like the statistics of how things are done, and a lot of things I'm like big words, I have no idea what this means. And then like, so for someone who was just diagnosed with something and they're trying to find out more, it's like, I'm just gonna go to social media and TikTok because that's a
Yeah.
lot easier to consume,
Sure.
right? And I mean, that's why I sort of like wanted to have or encourage a lot of mental health providers to actually talk about these things, uh like in social media, like collaborating with people, being a part of the community,
Mhm.
because that's how you disseminate a lot of the information. It's not going to remove our sort of like of our expertise, because you still need the training and stuff to be able to understand this, because
Right.
it's not like, oh, you now have the information, you should be able to do it. Otherwise I wouldn't go, I don't otherwise I wouldn't need a therapist, but I do because I'm
Yeah.
human and I know stuff, but that doesn't mean anything.
Sure. And working in the mental health field as I do and you guys do as well, you know that you can read all the studies that you want. Whether the person's bipolar, whether they're depressed, anxiety, they suffer from the spectrum of schizophrenia and the different types that make it up. I am not going to diagnose somebody or pretend to know anything about them just by reading a paper. I want to get to know that person, and it takes way more than one session, way more than an hour. So
Oh
I
yeah.
question anybody and everybody that ever shows their face on TV on these news segments and everything else, and they'll say, "Well, this," and I'm just throwing names out there because I really don't follow any of them. I just seen them in the news, like the Brian Kohlbergs or the Chad Daybells, and they say, "Well, he's a sociopath this way, and he's psychopath this way, and he's narcissistic this way." And I'm thinking, you've never met the man, you've never
Hmm.
spent any time with them,
Mhm.
so don't pretend to diagnose them, and people don't understand that. And I think that's a very difficult concept for people to come to realize, as well as the biggest one. It's hard for them to grasp is the fact that even though I've done this 20 years, I can't tell you anything concrete about the number of mass murderers or serial killers that I've dealt with over the years and what the common denominator is, other than they're dangerously normal. I can't devise an assessment or a test to say this is going to definitively tell you a person is going to be, a sociopath, or this person here is going to develop psychopathy or anything along those lines, because they're from every end of the spectrum.
Mhm.
So for me to say this is what you need to look for in a serial killer or a mass murderer, no, I'm not. I'm not here to do that. But I am here to try to get the information out to people instead of what they just see in a magazine or in a news clip on somebody like Dennis Rader or somebody like Scott Peterson or somebody like that. I can say, well, this is what I know about them because I've dealt with them, and you take it from there. So,
I think my biggest draw to you, honestly, was so my background is, I know I was in the medical field a while, but my biggest background, my biggest specialty was I was a crime scene remediation and biohazard specialist.
right,
And so, I and yes, like I've always been into like true crime and blah blah blah, but like I've seen from the very beginning of like the incident, how it happened, the family, the victim. Like I've been in the nitty-gritty. I've read the personal diaries. I've seen the insides of these people's houses. So like I had all this knowledge like on that side of it. And then once you came in, I was like, "Oh, I can get like a full picture now." Because I was like, I have like A through G and then you have like H through Z and I'm like, "Yes, I can just smash them together and I can learn now." So like me personally cuz I every time I said, "Oh, I did crime scene cleaning and biohazard remediation," they're like, "Oh, you have stories." I'm like, "Well, it's not like I sat down with the dude who did it, but I can tell you
No, but
everything else, you know?"
I will
And
say that I don't think you give yourself enough credit though, because I would say that, you have the whole alphabet. I only have maybe X, Y, and Z. That's it. Because if
yeah.
you're in that person's environment, where you see the journals, you see the crime scene itself, you've seen the family, the reactions
Mhm.
that's taken place then at the present time, way more knowledgeable than when I get them years later and I only get their version. So
Right.
you already have that almost complete circle. I only get them at the tail end when they've had enough time to perfect a lot of their lies in most instances, or change their stories or anything else. So um, what what you guys do is way more, in my opinion, way more important than what I do. I have a captive audience. They're not going anywhere. So until they stick the needle in the arm, till they put the gas over them, till they put the electric chair on, whatever they've chosen, they're mine. So I can freeze them, I can ice them, do whatever however you want to call it, but they're still going to be there.
Right.
Where when you see the family, that you get that instantaneous reaction of everybody, and that
Mhm.
at the heat of the moment like that means so much more because you can divulge so much more information out of
Yeah, cuz that's a big thing too is so I'm not a doctor in psychology like some people in here, but I did go to school for it, and so that helped my background of doing this, but I know with that knowledge and with what I had to do, I know I changed personally, like my whole personality changed, my coping mechanisms changed. I lost some friends because they were like, "Oh, wow, like you're just super blunt, you don't care." And I was like, "Well, uh sorry." So, I know like I had to change in these like situations. So, I was wondering like how has like anyone commented on like maybe a possible change in yourself, or has there been, or is it like you're guarded enough, or like how has that changed you personally?
So in the professional world, I would say, oh, it hasn't changed me one bit. I separate myself professionally, and I never take it home with me or anything else. But of course, it would be a complete lie, and you guys would call me out on it. So the fact of the matter is this: that anytime you deal with um, the human race, anytime that you deal with criminals that do not really value human life, and you surround yourself with them over a period of time, you're going to change whether you want to or not.
Right.
And I have become aware of it. I don't know what to do about it yet, but I
Hmm.
have become aware of it in the sense that I've become desensitized,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the loss of human life.
Hmm.
So I'll use myself as an example. I just got a letter in the mail from a guy out of Arkansas this past week, maybe 2 weeks ago, who's facing the death penalty, and reached out to me, and he apparently kidnapped his 12-year-old niece and raped her and killed her. And it was a pretty brutal murder to the point where she bit her tongue off completely and everything else. And I'm reading through the letter and I'm looking at the front and back and everything. I'm like, just one person. Why do I care about this? And that's something that nobody should ever question themselves on, because
Right.
one human life is way too many. But when you're
Hmm.
dealing with somebody like Samuel Little, who I did, and he had 86 or 87, confirmed murders, or Charles Ng, who has 25, or, of course, Gary Ridgway and people like that. And I'm not trying to name drop at all. I'm trying to throw out there names of body counts that
Right.
you're so used to dealing with those vast numbers of homicides. Then all of a sudden, in your back of your mind, you start thinking, well, a person who kills one or two, how are they even on death row? And one should never even think that way. So
Right.
that's a downfall on my side that I've tried to become more um, open and realistic about, that I need to work on. But then again, I have to hide all of those emotions when I go into death row, and when they
Hmm.
tell me what they've done, pretend that it makes no difference.
No, I completely get that because, like I said, a lot of people I've since leaving the field and I've transitioned to doing lab work now. Um, I definitely have seen the change of how I've had to reacclimate to normal society. So, and there's definitely been times where I'll say something at work that's super callous, and everyone looks at me, and I'm like, "Oh shit!" And then I have to like call up Liz and Boo, and I'm like, "I fucked up. Help! What's something I should say to fix this situation?" Because like I don't mean it like
Right,
to be callous. It's just like a fact. Just like you were saying, like, oh, in that sense, you're desensitizing yourself as to a number rather than like a life, which is
sure,
something you have to do to
right,
continue. And I get that 100%. It's
right.
hard,
It is very hard, but it's something
but
that you have to do. I mean, when I'm witnessing an execution, I have a bunch of reporters that are standing behind me, writing down everything emotion wise or reaction wise to the three witnesses that are in front of them, myself included. And I don't want them writing stuff about me that they think is going
mm,
through my head, because I certainly
mhm,
don't talk to them, and I don't talk to the press or anything after an execution.
right.
Um, but you have to go in there stone faced. Sometimes I'm the last person to ever talk to this individual before you get that tap on the shoulder and it's time for them to die. And you're like, okay, so you have to mentally prepare yourself. This person isn't in hospice. They're not suffering. It's you were just laughing and joking with them maybe a half hour ago, and here you're getting ready to watch their life being taken in front of you. So I certainly wouldn't call it a skill, but it is
Yeah.
something that you have to be mindful of, because everything that you say and do is going to be recorded, and skewed in such a way that other people are going to think differently of you.
Yeah, that's yeah, I completely sympathize with that for sure. It's hard to find a rare breed like us
Yeah.
to
Yes.
do that. So it's the fact that you're doing it at all is a lot. Um, Boone, do you have?
Have you thought of doing stand-up comedy?
um, I
Have you
use
ever gotten
humor.
that question before?
I use humor a lot, even on death row. It's kind of like a defense mechanism
Mhm.
when you want to deflect certain things. So when these guys will sit down and I'll talk about the weather or politics, and finally they get bored and they're like, "Don't you want to hear what I've done?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm assuming it's not jaywalking because we're sitting on death row."
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Well, yeah, but I was like known as one of the most notorious serial killers." And I'm like, "Really? Because we wouldn't have this conversation if you were that good, because you'd still be out there doing it."
Right.
And they appreciate that then, or when they send me a piece of art, and some of it is really good, the kind you'd want to hang in galleries. Other ones are horrible, and I'll say to them, good lord, I hope you kill better than you paint, because your painting sucks. So certain things like that, and that, believe it or not, breaks the ice, and then they're like, oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
Kimberlin's not so bad after all. So then that's what I that's how I converse with them in such a way that it puts them at ease enough to where they think, okay, he's not so bad after all. And but I'm also thinking in the back of my mind, they already know that I'm doing this, so therefore,
Mm.
what's my next move?
Mhm.
So it's always, you know, one step ahead but two steps behind. So
So instead of stand-up comedy, I'd say you're more of an insult comic.
pretty much, yeah, but my delivery would suck anyway. So let's be
Mm.
honest.
Now, like what Liz said, is that the first time you've been asked that question?
That is the very first time.
Yes.
Ugh,
Good job,
yes.
Ruby.
Fuck
And
yeah.
you have
There's a first on
succeeded.
this episode, people.
You have succeeded.
Yeah, Boone.
But I had a reason to ask that. It's like, so I used to work in county mental health, and we all
Okay.
have the dark humor because of what we see in the depths of
Oh,
society,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So it's
absolutely.
like we would make great comedians because after a session or after a call, we would be throwing the jokes of like with these
Oh
things, and it'd
yeah,
be the darkest things ever.
absolutely.
And so
Oh
I
yeah.
just think we would make good comedians because people be like, oh my God, that person said that. Yeah. we did, you know? And so I think it'd
Yeah.
be funny to make a light
Well,
of it.
and it's very true. It's very true, and that's why, believe it or not, I don't bring up mental illness a lot in the talks that I do, whether it's podcast or whatever, um, because that stigma is so horrible out there. You know, I deal with a lot of mentally ill individuals here in St. Pete as part of my job, um, but none of them are serial killers or mass murderers or rapists or anything like that. And the moment people ask me what are all these individuals on death row afflicted with? Are they schizophrenic? Are they this? Are they bipolar and everything? I usually try to deflect that completely away because in their mind they start thinking, well, then if they're bipolar, if they're paranoid schizophrenic, or they see hallucinations or audio or video hallucinations, then everybody must be that way, and it's not that way at all.
Right.
A lot of times it's drug psychosis. A lot of times it is that they just like to kill, and people
Mhm.
don't realize that the answers are not always crystal clear. They're not concrete. People, humans are odd creatures. We have the most complex brain system out there, and to try to figure it out, it would take, I don't know if we'll ever figure it out. But the fact of the matter is, we have individuals that are out there that do not have the capacity to have empathy. They have that lack of impulse control. They do not value human life. All of that is abnormal to the normal person that
Yeah.
we would say is normal. And even if I could show definitively that, say it's somewhere in the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex or something along those lines, the amygdala, whatever, and I've shown with 100% certainty that this person, if they have this genetic mark or this genetic makeup, they are going to be suffering from psychopathy, that they're going to be antisocial, that they are going to kill. The population out there is still going to be divided. They're
Mhm.
not going to understand that, just like they don't understand when it comes to um, the gay rights and the LBGQ plus community. Is if you can show that, say I found this rainbow gene, so to speak, and I don't want to demean it or anything like that, and I show with 100% certainty that you were born this way, and here it shows it. The far right, with the religious beliefs that they have, will never accept it. They will always say no, it's a learned behavior. And so I think we focus too much on trying to come up with concrete, definitive answers to why a person kills, or why a person is this way, or why a person is left-handed, or whatever. And instead of just sitting back and trying to understand them more.
Can
That's
you
kind of one
clip
of the
that?
questions that,
Please clip that when we review. Like that was like
yeah.
gold. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about too, because there is this sort of I don't know, like maybe misunderstanding as to what it is, but a lot of the times there are, like, we think of it ethics wise, we think about like psychology wise, but the law is very black and white. There's a lot of things that it doesn't take into consideration. So I wanted to ask you, like, in your experience, like, what is some of like the major differences that you have seen in terms of like how we think about the world or people's actions in terms of psychology, and how we think about them in terms of the law?
I think that, and again, I just want to state this, it's only my opinion, not professional opinion, it's my opinion, that we in society, in America in general, I think we're a very narcissistic country, in a sense that we always want to think that we're the best at everything.
Because we're
And
special.
yes, and people that tend to think that way have never been out of the country. I feel bad for individuals like that. I feel bad that we in this society, in this country, try to keep people in this country, and um, we don't try to get them to explore other societies and other cultures. We're 90 miles from Cuba here in Florida, but we're grounded from them, basically.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
can travel to you go to China and Russia, communist countries and places like that with a visa or whatever, but you can't go to Cuba, which is 90 miles from the south of Florida, without special permission. And it's 2024. Um, there's so many different ways that you get your license suspended and your passport suspended and everything else. So they don't encourage people to go outside of the country to see what other societies are really like, other cultures are really like, and
Mhm.
then maybe we can learn from them, their healthcare systems, their educational systems, their criminal justice systems, their prison systems. Instead, we want to say we are number one at everything, and the reality is we're just not. And even though I try not to push an opinion one way or the other for the death penalty or against it, I sit there and I tell people if we can't figure out a universal healthcare, if we can't figure out a universal educational system, a way that we can break the cycle of homelessness and mental illness, why are we having a debate on which is the best way to take another human life legally? To me,
Yeah.
makes no sense whatsoever. But that's not very popular. And politicians, they run on these platforms of let's be tougher on crime,
Mhm.
but yet they don't change with the times.
Right.
Mhm.
So I can't believe in 2024 that we are having arguments over women's reproductive systems, and yet the males in the Congress and Senate and legislation and everything else are the ones that are spearheading taking all these rights away. And I'm not saying one way or the other whether abortion is good or bad. I'm saying I should not be making that decision for somebody else. Um, and the laws just do not change with the times. The people that are holding these positions in the higher up, Senate and Congress, they don't change their views. They don't continue to
Mhm.
learn. And when you strike that, when I was in high school, we didn't have the cell phone capability and everything like that that everyone has now.
Mhm.
So fast forward now, everybody can record everything, everybody can send pictures, they can do whatever. But certain laws still haven't changed.
Mhm.
So, and again, I don't want to say this in a minimizing way, but if a person that is 17 years old and 18-year-old and they are having consensual sex together and they're having a relationship together, that is perfectly legal. Nobody can do anything about that. The parents can hate the boyfriend or the girlfriend or vice versa, but nobody can be arrested. They're within that age range of consensual and adult enough to engage in an act that could potentially lead them to pregnancy or a disease that may or may not ever be reversible, such as the herpes virus, things of that nature, or the AIDS virus, things like that. That's perfectly legal. But if you take a picture of that 17-year-old and you disseminate that or hang on to it or look at it, whatever, the picture itself is a felony. The
Right.
act that could actually do something that could ruin a life is perfectly fine, but you better never have a picture of it because that's what you could go to jail for. And
Hmm.
those are the things that in the world of psychology, I think is how I look at it is why are we trying to advance in our society without thinking first? And just because it sounds good doesn't mean it is good. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So those are the things that I look at. And so trying to look at better ways to take a human life to make it more um, um, to seem more compassionate for the witnesses is, in my opinion, totally wrong. If you're going to sentence somebody to death, then you should be man or woman enough to watch that person
Mhm.
expire. And even though
Yeah.
they say it shouldn't be cruel and unusual punishment, doesn't say it shouldn't hurt, but yet they want to devise it in such a way that appears to make it harmless and that they don't feel it. But in reality, the fact of the matter is you're taking a human life.
So that actually goes into my next question. I know I actually asked you this at the talk, but not for here. Um, the whole death row situation. and the actual execution. Um, I've done research into it and everything, and more often than not, it's botched. Like
Sure.
it's like, and not that many people know about that, and so I want to know like your behind the scenes kind of look at that, because like I know you said in the talk you said one of the very first ones you did was like several hours because they couldn't do it right, and like most people don't realize it's not like bloop 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 done. It's like uh it's not that easy.
Well, very, very true. The very first one that I witnessed, I was told it was going to take, 18 to 20 minutes, start to finish. It's like putting a dog to sleep, done. Okay, fine. So I go to the prison, we're in the briefing room. I'm with the defense attorneys, they're, talking about dinner and where they stayed and all that stuff. Um, they take us over to the death house, which is in the prison yard. So you have to walk in the prison yard, and the prison's on lockdown, so everybody can see you, and they're yelling out the windows, everything. It's like you would see in the movies on that. You get to the death house, and there's three seats, a partition, and three more seats for the state's witnesses. Um, and then they bring the individual out, and they start to administer the IVs and find the veins. Unbeknownst to me, I did not realize that nobody in the medical field, nurses or doctors, can be a part of an execution because of the Hippocratic oath that they take. So it's more often not prison EMTs, and I'm assuming that either, if not yourselves, a lot of your listeners out there, viewers, would have gone through a surgery before. I know I have, and you'll meet with an anesthesiologist. There's a exact science to it all,
Hmm.
uh, but on death row, when you're administered the lethal injections, depending on what the cocktail is, you're going to get it all, no matter what, the same amount. And it works faster on some than others. Other people have collapsed veins from maybe lengthy years of drug use. Other ones have become a little obese because of their sedentary lifestyle while on death row. Either way, the individuals can't find the veins sometimes. So my first execution, the veins could not be located in the arm. Then they were sticking needles in the neck, in the ankles, everywhere. And in the state of Ohio, you had to have two ports of entry. So when they finally did find the first one, they're running a bag of saline solution through to keep the veins open while they're working on the other one. The individual happened to needed to go to the restroom. He's like, I got to take a piss. And I'm sitting
So
there,
cause almost so much saline.
yeah. And I'm thinking, this cannot really be happening. Am I on candid camera or what? So again, you could hear a pin drop because I'm not making a noise. I could literally hear the pencils to the paper from the reporters behind me from AP and everywhere else, and I'm not making a sound, and I'm watching this show unfold in front of me that I had never been prepared for. And so they let the guy get off the table. He went to use the restroom, came back, hopped back up on the table. They started working on him again. Um, they the guard had to hold the other one's hand steady to attach the IVs when they did get the ports of entry opened, and it was just it took over 2 hours from start to finish, and it was so bizarre to see that take place, that to show that we are so ill-equipped and unprofessional when it comes to taking a human life, and yet we will do anything that we can to make sure that that's accomplished.
That's crazy. Yeah, I because you would think there'd be like some sort of like set standards, but apparently like
Well,
Well,
at the very
when
least,
I was able to get the death row protocol that had never been seen before, and it was by a fluke because another judge friend of mine, one of his clients, was sentenced to death, and I was there to interview him and everything just before. And when he became a judge, he could no longer represent people, but he wanted to be there for that execution. So, and he
yeah.
wanted to do away with the death penalty altogether. So he wanted the protocol for it. The state of Ohio denied him, and so then he subpoenaed that as a judge, and it's huge. It's really thick. And he called me one day. He said, "I got this protocol." He's like, "Do you want it?" I'm like, I'd love to have it, but I don't think I'm allowed to. And he said, I'm an elected official, meaning himself, and I subpoenaed this and I requested it. So therefore, being a public official, it's public record now. So
Oh my
this is
god,
your
that's so
public
cool.
record. So he gave it to
Nice.
me, and there's one page in there, and it goes through step by step on how to, insert the catheter, do this, do this, do this, and then
Right.
on the next page it says, if all else fails, call a surgeon and beg for forgiveness. It says it right in the protocol. So
So I actually this is gonna I highly doubt this has happened, but it's so true. So I know that like no doctors or nurses can do it, but there's so many like drug addicts who know where the veins are. Have I
That's
wonder
too
if they've
funny.
ever like I wonder if they've ever had like a druggy prisoner like, well, hey, you didn't take the oath and you're great at finding veins. I mean, look at you. Like I wonder if they've ever wanted to be like, hey, like Joe, meth head Joe down in cell block D, like, hey, get him over to find the vein. Like
it's odd that because I have a lot of doctors and nurses friends of mine, and even though they've taken that oath, again, this is this nation is very polarized one way or the other when it comes to
mhm,
these debatable topics. And I have a lot of them that say, if I could do it, I would do it. I'd give them the drug. I would insert the needle. I could show
right.
how it's done. Um, but they've made it so political now that there's no way that they can. So the only two people that you never see in the execution process
Mhm.
is the physician that is there because they have to pronounce them dead,
Oh,
Mhm.
what?
or if the phone rings on the wall because there is one and they have a crash cart there just in case the doctor has to intervene, but the curtain will always close. So when the curtain closes, they'll bring the physician out, pronounce them dead, they leave, they go behind the wall again, and the curtain opens back up. So you never see the physician and you never see those that are actually pushing the buttons for the execution.
Okay, so worst case, the doctor could step in to find veins, but they just choose not to, I guess.
Well, but I guess the only thing is like, what happens for some. I'm just trying to find a loophole here now. I'm like, what about like someone who is like no longer licensed in the medical field? They still know where the veins are and can kind of do it. Just they can't
Like the
practice.
disgraced physician can come in and
Sure.
administer it.
Hey, it will be faster. Isn't like we were talking about like how ethical it is to do this, but they're not really
Well, that's what
really
I'm
doing it.
that's what I'm saying. They could strike up deal with meth head Joe, like, hey, you get 5 months off your sentence if you come stick this dude on death row. Like, like
Which
that could
is
be okay.
which makes perfect sense, but so does this conversation because if you think about right now, we went from the guy off the street who could find a vein even if he was Stevie Wonder because he's used so long, so he could find that vein. You could find a retired physician or a disgraced physician or nurse that could find the veins. All of those are possible solutions, maybe not probable, but possible. And yet the conversation is how do we make that happen instead of
Right.
why are we making it
Yes.
happen, which
Hmm.
is the
Hmm.
bigger question
That's very
that's
true.
harder to answer because it's always easy to find a solution to finish in it.
Right.
But if you can't find the solution as to why it's happening to
Hmm.
begin with, then that's a little bit different of a story. So, um, but yeah, all valid, very valid, but it doesn't get to the crux of why are we doing it to begin with.
Right.
When
So I
nobody
I
in Europe
know
does it, nobody in Canada does it, nobody in Mexico does it, why are the only two industrialized nations, the United States and Japan, why are we the only two nations that
Japan does
still
it?
I was literally just about to say, is there any other country or nation that does it other than the US? Like maybe in
industrialized
Africa
wise, it's us in Japan.
and
So
not even in Africa anywhere?
so you have certain countries that are not considered like industrialized nations. You'll have third world countries, places like that,
Okay.
Iran, obviously, and you know, Saudi Arabia, things like that. But again, they don't have the value of the human life. They don't even value women's rights that much over there. So you'll
Mhm.
see executions take place over there. But when it comes to democracies and industrialized nations, then it's
Okay.
Japan and
So
us.
like first world countries is where the
That
only
are
two.
yes.
Okay.
So
Wow, I didn't know about Japan. Like cuz I was actually going to also ask another question like if there was another country that you could go to continue research with these serial killers like I know in Europe they don't have like death row there, but they do have these serial killers and everything.
sure.
Like would you go to any of these countries in Europe to study them, or is it just purely on the death penalty? So would you ever go to Japan to learn and
Well,
do that or
I would love to interviewing anybody in like Europe or Canada, places like that, just to see how they view um, the American system compared to theirs, and I would like to look at their justice system, inside the prison system
Mhm.
compared to ours, um, just to get an idea of what really does go on, because none of my males or females that I've dealt with over the years on death row and that I still deal with have ever said, you know, if I would have known they had the death penalty, I wouldn't have killed those individuals. So it's not a
Right.
deterrent by any means. Um, what they will do is kill and then wish maybe later on they weren't caught or that they had some
Right.
remorse and didn't do it. But none of my individuals have ever really shown any remorse either. So
Okay.
Wait, I have a question based on that. Hold on, because I wanted to hear your ideas on redemption.
Okay.
be a little bit more specific.
No,
No,
that's enough.
she's
That's
leaving it at
no.
that. That's all. Up
Well,
for
because
you to decide.
I was listening to one of your other interviews with someone else, and you talked about this because that was also my like one of my questions. Because I tend to want to see the world through rose tinted glasses,
Hmm.
and these two
She
ladies
she's
often are
our
like, "No, take them
she's
off."
our rainbows and unicorns. Boone and I are like the elder goth and emo. Have like a dour look, and Liz is like our unicorns and rainbows. Everyone happy and
Yes,
so,
and so okay, so I think part of that is always like I'm always concerned about like certain things because I just wished it was better, right? So one of the things that I often think about when I see like movies or whenever I hear some of like the true crime podcasts and stuff, it's the idea about redemption. Because I listened to this one podcast where they sort of like talk about the individual's life since like birth or sometimes even before birth and sort of like all the elements that went into like you know potentially why this person did it kind of thing, right? And then a lot of the times it's like there was like when they were young there was a potential like if they got help maybe then it
mhm.
wouldn't have happened this way, right? If they had someone that was supportive or someone who treated them well, it would have changed. So but you said it yourself like that you kind of get them sort of like at the tail end of it, but now sort of like knowing because you get the peek behind sort of like the curtain, right? Sometimes they tell you, I'm assuming, a lot more than we get to know based on the articles that I've written or books or whatever. So I'm wondering like sort of like if your idea on sort of like redemption is something that is even uh possible, or something we should like look into in terms of because part of me is like why are people even in jail? Like it's supposed to be like like a punishment, but I'm like, but should we rehabilitate as well or like just punish? Because there's a lot of things, but yeah, so that's kind of
Go to
where my
Norway,
thinking
babe.
was.
Go to Norway.
Well,
So
I mean that's why, like if it works there,
right,
Cause,
but
cause this is America.
yeah, pretty much. They've also solved the flooding issues over there in the Netherlands, and that, but yet we can't solve them over here because we won't learn to
America.
fix. Yeah, very valid question. So the problem gets to be is that everybody puts murderers and serial killers and death row inmates, I should say, on a different pedestal. So we have less than, I think it's right around maybe 3,000 people on death row in this
Mhm.
country, which is a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, but compared to the rest of the prison makeup system that has hundreds of thousands compared to 3,000, and how do you separate those 3,000 on death row from the other potentially 100,000 murderers in general pop that only got there because they entered a plea or had better attorneys or was a different
Right.
race or had more money? They still committed the same act, they just didn't arrive at the same sentence. So we don't
Mhm.
study their upbringing. We don't look at them as closely. We only want to focus on the ones on death row. And I think
Mhm.
that kind of skews that whole population because you're guaranteed that everybody on death row is there for taking at least a human life. But there are a vast majority of people in prison that are serving long term prison sentences that have taken human lives as well. Yet we don't focus on their upbringing as much either. We'll
Mhm.
look at, can we parole them? Can we um, rehabilitate them? Can we give them the tools that they can acclimate back into society if they ever do get out? And I have inmates here in Florida that one guy he's on death row for slitting the throats of three people at a Cracker Barrel in Florida and robbing the place and killing him, throwing him in the freezer. But he did it with another guy. Both of them, same event. Both of them killed the same amount of people. One took a plea, the other one didn't. One's on death row, one's getting life with the possibility of parole. Yet we're not looking at the different backgrounds. We're only looking at the one that's on death row. So, so I know it didn't really answer your question, but
No,
it,
no, I
it
mean,
brings up more questions of,
Yeah.
are we asking the right type of questions? I guess.
and it's good, and that's something for us to sort of like also take into account, right? Like when I was talking about like the people that enjoy this, like we don't think about the rest of the population. We're going with the ones that make the news, right? Like the front page
Sure.
news,
Right.
Mhm.
in terms of things. But there is a lot more that we can understand. But because it's not as exciting or interesting, we're
Right.
not paying attention to it. Yeah.
Right.
Boone, I
It's
know you
sad
have
but
a ton
true.
of questions, and I want to hear them.
So, just
Uh,
two thoughts, two comments. So, segueing from what you just said, I had a comment about, because education is my passion. I was a counselor and I in the gifted program, but it's also paired with the other side of special education. To me, when you talk about this scenario of the prison population, I automatically see the same reasons why the whole like the biggest gap, the majority of people who need support and could get support get neglected. It's the whole
Yes.
like everyone gets lost in the cracks, but the only population that you focus on is the sensationalized extreme version of a something, and it just makes me
mhm.
go fucking crazy. I feel like bonkers thinking about like why do we keep on doing this? It's cyclical and it repeats in every system that we're in. So that was like my comment on that. Another question is, I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, is what is your Myers-Briggs personality type? I need to know, and if even if you don't believe in the system, I need you to humor me because I need to know how you're thinking.
She's gonna give you no. Bill,
Take it right now.
she is going to give you like a full on, like, I guarantee you after this interview, she's like, Hope, give me his email. I'm gonna send him 20 tests and I'm gonna write a book about him, about all of his, because she's like the archetype like guru over here.
So I've never taken the Myers Briggs myself or the MMPI or anything like that, but I think
Uh-huh.
I have Jeffrey Dahmer's laying around somewhere. If you ever want to read his,
I would love
the
to. That'd
results
actually be
are
really
really
Oh
interesting.
my god, you just made Booney's ear.
um, I think
She's
it was.
glowing.
I think it was administered by Park Dietz, in fact. So I have all of that with his handwriting samples and
That's
stuff. So
amazing.
yeah, that and notice how I did that to deflect it away from you wanting to get inside my head. So I'm giving you Jeffrey Dahmer.
No, I
Oh
mean
no, no, she will find a way. Like, it took me forever. She like tracked me down. She's like, "Oh, you are gonna do this, and I'm gonna analyze you." So,
Uh, it's yeah, and when you speak of the educational system, it's really sad in the sense that we suck at education. I'm just going
And
to
he's
put that out
deflecting again.
That's
Boone,
fine.
get him.
Education's my
uh,
heart too, so like we can do
You're
education.
like later.
because I know
Please.
education is her passion. So, and I don't
Oh,
want
okay,
Back
okay.
on to me. Okay, I see.
to. So,
Deflecting master.
so I would think that you would agree with me. I think it would be fair to say that our educational system is not up to par with other nations. Is that a fair and accurate statement? Yes or no?
Mm, mm.
Meh.
It's a
Meh.
yes,
Meh,
it's a
sir.
yes or no,
Deflect,
and
Boone, deflect.
I can't
Deflect back
understand.
on him.
Oh, okay, hold on one second.
The,
My volume. Hold on.
well, the old stream volume.
see, see,
No,
we have
there's
a
like
master.
there's people roofing across the street. And I don't know if you were hearing the hammer the whole time. I'm so sorry. I didn't. Anyways, okay.
No,
Could you
It's
repeat
okay.
the
no,
statement?
no. I thought this was your master technique to keep deflecting, and this is instead of the Game of Thrones, it's
Went
the
through a
game of
tunnel.
deflection, and I'm just the referee right now, and I'm enjoying it.
Okay,
No,
what was the statement?
I brought up the fact that I think it's a fair and accurate statement. I would think that you would agree with me that our educational system is not up to par with many other
Oh, totally.
nations.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So our educational system is run by, again, politicians, in my opinion, and they like to use academia words
Mm,
that confuse people.
yes.
And whether the students are gifted or special needs, whether they want to use this term all inclusive in the classroom that will supposedly benefit everyone, but
Mhm,
in the reality of it all is that because as an academic, professional, say to you, we're placing these students in the same classroom to make them all inclusive. The other students may not accept them, and
mhm.
inclusion would be acceptance.
Yes.
So you're
Right.
already putting them up against a wall and setting them up for failure. And then you're also taking the other children that are there to accelerate, and yet they can't
Mm-hmm.
because of this word that we're placing them in the classroom. So then you remove the gifted ones and put them in a gifted school, which then brings this other school into all a population of maybe special needs or those that are a little bit harder to deal with, which brings their scores down
Mm-hmm.
lower, which the public has a lesser opinion of them on.
Yes.
And it's all done in the name of education. And we're so far off that we create the problems. The educated individuals in the society are the ones creating the problems instead of asking, what should we do? Ask
Because
your
it's all
parents.
theoretical. I remember you said that too, right? The whole difference between
Yes.
experience, lived experience, actually diving into the
Yeah.
community and just being in the I've always called it the ivory tower of academia. You can't just write about
Sure.
it and then kind of like reference each other's articles without doing the groundwork, which is
Right.
like the
Right.
gap is so big. And so like when we talk about
Right.
this as a panel together, I'm hoping we bridge that. But like I know that ego, which you mentioned at the end of your book, like that's the biggest
Sure.
part. We have ego and perception of value and identity with these terminologies that we pair with ourselves and how we treat
Mhm.
information. And that's why it's so difficult. Like if a layperson talks about this information, they're going to question your like where's your accolades? Where's your
Right.
where did you get this information from? Like what if someone's just really curious and explored and really delved into the research themselves, but they don't have the degree? Like it just we
Where they
devalue
lived it.
Yeah.
them.
They've lived it with their own
Mhm.
children or
Yeah.
their
Right.
own community. To me,
And
that's
that's
way more experience.
where like I've come in. Like Boone has, her background and her professionalism. You and Liz have been through the doctorates and everything, and I'm like I grew up super poor, and unfortunately, like I went to college on scholarships, but I never finished it because like I never had the money. I had to work like 3 jobs, and then I just fell to the wayside because I'm also neurodivergent and I have a lot of learning disabilities. Like I'm very smart. It's just my disabilities. If I'm working 3 jobs to go to school, I can't do 10 hours of studying to make up. Like it just didn't happen for
Mhm.
me. But like and that's where I feel like so discouraged in these educational systems is because like, all right, I needed a little help, but I couldn't pay for it, and now like I'm stuck with learning disabilities, neurodivergence, and and smarts. And that's why I love reading like books like yours or like anything like that, because like I want to learn. I want to do these things, but like
Well, you've
it's
learned
not
way more than you ever
access.
would have in college.
For real.
So,
Right. But
Yes.
but then it comes down to let me get a job, and even though I
sure,
have 20 years experience under my belt, they're like, "Oh, but you don't have a little piece of paper." I'm like, "I know more than the
right.
people."
They want
So
to
like,
look at those letters behind your name, which is so
yeah.
horrible. And
What?
the fact of the matter is, again, this country, we push way too many people to college.
Mhm.
And instead of focusing on, the skilled labor and everything else that is really, you mentioned your roofers right now,
Yeah.
causing this, distraction. I'm educated. I have 4 degrees. I don't know what the hell to do with a roof, and
Yeah.
these individuals are the ones that have to. Uh, Hell, I put gas in my vehicle. I don't change my oil. I don't do any of that stuff.
Mhm.
Not because I don't have the time or I think I'm better than it. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Mhm.
So
Right.
people, we put way too much emphasis and credibility on those letters after our names, and we need to get away from that first and foremost.
So
Um,
so
And
pro tip real quick, never use bleach when cleaning blood. That's my pro tip.
I've read that online too. Yeah.
yeah,
But do you know why?
doesn't it make it show up more
Cuz
with the luminol?
it's not the luminol, but there is a chemical residue, so you never want to use a bleach because then they're going to question why there's all these bleach
Mhm.
stains.
Mhm.
Right.
So the best thing is like a degreaser.
Oh, see,
oh, I was about
learn
to
something
say,
new every day.
Now, what you do with that information is up to you. Hint, hint. But coming from a
yeah.
crime scene remediation background,
No,
I am
listen,
just
listen.
giving knowledge of what to do.
No, you're just giving away all the knowledge. Earlier, you were like, no, you calm them down, you hold them, and then you stab them. That's what you said in the last
Oh
episode.
my god! No,
Gain their
so
trust.
no, so that
Yes.
wait, that was I doing that? What was that with Mark earlier? Yeah, because I was like, "Oh, yeah, I treat my people like I would my dogs, like, you can't just, like, go in and stab them. You have to, like, calm them down, you have to pet them, and then you stab them." And they
See?
don't realize, like, because I used to
Wait,
be a
no, but
vet tech, so, like, I had to, like, calm the doggy down first, because otherwise they'll flail, and it's a whole thing. Stay tuned for that episode, people. That's another Mind Brain episode.
but you bring up a good point. Well, everyone does. Where because now we have like those studies, right? That shows that because a lot of kiddos they don't get the help that they need at
Right.
school. They kind of end up in prison because then even though they have the knowledge or ability or whatever, they're not really getting hired. They don't get where they need, or they have to sit there for 12 years listening, why are you so dumb, pay
Mhm.
attention to this thing, you're not normal, right? And then so when they try to find sort of like a community or someone that they somewhere they fit in, it's most of the time not a good place for them to be and thus end up in prison.
Right.
Well, when we're teaching to state standards, number one, where every teacher, and I speak this way because my wife just retired after 30 years of teaching, so I've lived it and have seen
Wifey, cover your ears.
it. Oh my God, she's taught me so much on, because of course growing, when we married early on, and I'm doing the death row stuff, and I'm like, you're freaking teaching sixth graders and seventh graders, English or whatever. How bad can it be? And then
That's
you
scarier than
realize,
death row.
yeah, and then you realize that you have to deal with the parents and then the administrations and everything else. That you're under the gun for everything to get
Mhm.
these marks for the kids for the tests to move forward. And I'm thinking, what population are we really serving? We're not. Everything is about the money. In order for
Yeah.
them to get, the grants from the state or the budgets approved by the state based on the children and everything else in there. And realistically, as a teacher in a grade school, why wouldn't you want those kids on Ritalin and Adderall and dope them up so they can at least sit still so I can do my job, so
Yeah.
I can keep my job, so the principal and the superintendent is pleased with whatever scores they need, and you're taking the kid out of the entire equation
Mhm.
because they
Mhm.
really don't mean anything. You just want them
Yep.
sitting down, shutting up, and focused. on whatever you're teaching for the day, and yet they're not allowed to really learn about life.
Well, it's I think earlier you said no, 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 no. My brain was too fast, didn't catch up with my mouth for a second there. Um you were talking about how we don't really um no, it left. No,
You can
it
do
was a
it.
good
I
point. It
believe
was
in
a
you.
good point.
Boone, save us.
Oh, how we can't really diagnose people,
Oh,
or like a lot of sometimes people in the health field come on TV and then they said, oh, this person is
Mm.
narcissistic or whatever it is. They kind of, hand out diagnosis like candy. And I've heard stories too of where, like, like in schools, people just, kiddos get a diagnosis and they're never seen by
Right.
anybody.
oh yeah.
They never talk to anybody
Hmm.
about anything. It's just based on other people's perception of what the kid is doing or should not be doing. So
But
Mhm.
that already is not.
a lot of our medical system is set up that way, though, because, you know, first of all, should we really have that many commercials on TV that try to help you diagnose yourself,
Yeah.
and ask for the medications that are being advertised? I mean,
Hmm.
that's
My favorite
leading.
game is how many side effects can I get from that prescription?
Right, and the only reason they release those is to protect themselves from the tort or lawsuit actions that are eventually going to take over. And so then people question, well, why the prescription is so much higher in the United States and everywhere else? Well, because they're factoring in the cost for litigation later on
Mm.
when
Right.
people over here sue for every single thing, no matter what.
Hmm.
So it's not about revamping the pharmaceutical companies or revamping the insurance companies. It's more like revamping the tort system, the civil system of who can sue and how much, and put the caps
Right.
on in order to lower those costs. Because how do you value a human life or those side effects?
Right.
So it's so much easier just to prescribe them, hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Everything is just under the umbrella of capitalism. It really
It
is.
is.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
That
instant
was even
gratification.
in your book too, of how like how many times the prison system switched over to like a private sector
Hmm.
as
Sure,
well. I was like, I
absolutely.
knew it happened, but like I didn't realize to that extent.
We're a fast-paced, instant gratification nation, and that's not a very good thing. So people, when they go to the doctor, they don't want to come out without having a diagnosis.
Right.
They want to be told something is wrong. Well, that's the reason why I came to you.
Hmm.
And then they want to be fixed as fast as humanly
Mm.
possible because we don't really have the patience. So if you come to me and you have twisted your ankle, sprained it really bad, and I say, oh, it's horrible, you're going to have to elevate it, ice it, 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off, 20 minutes on. At least do that for a good, 6 days, 5, 6 days. Keep it wrapped, elevated, and the pain should subside, and you should be okay. But if they go to another doctor and that doctor says, oh, yeah, it looks pretty bad, you need to take, yeah, here's some Vicodin, here's some Oxy, whatever, that'll take the pain away, and you need to rest it a little bit. Well, they can do more with being on that prescription because it numbs everything. And
Right.
so, guess what? If that happens again to that person, they're not going to come see Kimberlin. They're going to go see the guy that fixed it right away.
Hmm.
Even
Hmm.
though my way may have been a little healthier, his was faster and felt better. So that's how we've become in this society. We want fixed, we want diagnosed, and we want fixed right now. So it's much easier to give that kid, the Adderall or the Vyvanse instead of saying, you know, as a boy at that age, they need to run some of that energy out. They need
Hmm.
more recess. They
Yeah.
need more playtime. They need to be more
Mhm.
active, but they can't do that. So,
It's true. Like I know when I went through therapy myself, my like I'm on medication and I was like, hey, I look, I'm not trying to like fast forward anything by any means. Like I know the process, but I was like, hey, I do need a little bit of a diagnosis in order to keep on my meds. And she's like, well, I don't like to give a diagnosis out. She was like, I can do it, but I'm not going to tell you. And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because I've learned with a lot of my patients, if I give them a diagnosis, that gives them an excuse."
Hmm.
Mhm.
And with she's like, "I'll put it in the reports, I'll give it to the doctors who can give you your meds, but if you fixate on this diagnosis, you're gonna use it as a crutch and not as an actual diagnosis." Like, and I was like, "Well, that makes sense, but I still need my meds. So can you please diagnose?" Like,
Right.
But it
so
kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier, where like sometimes we get desensitized to certain things,
Mhm.
right? It
right.
it happens really everywhere because, like, if someone is constantly seeing a specific group of people and they're there to med seeking or whatever,
Mhm.
then becomes an assumption of like everyone is doing it, so can't do it. Because I even went through that process too when I was trying to figure out whether I had anxiety or with this it was ADHD. My psychiatrist just kept repeating, I can't give you certain medications, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you can't give me Ritalin or those highly addictive. I just need to know if it is. So then I don't know. It just makes me feel better, right? Because I have
Right.
an assumption. I don't want to self-diagnose. I want to talk to someone else. But it again, it just becomes this thing of like, well, are you med seeking though?
Mhm.
You
Well,
know?
and it's because we've come to the realization in this country that medications fix everything. That's what
Right.
we're
Mm,
being brainwashed into thinking. So, when cold and flu season rolls around and somebody goes to the urgent care or anything like that, they want to come out with an antibiotic. You better give me that freaking Z pack or something. Just
Those
to,
are the worst things ever, by the way. Z-Packs are the worst things because they
I,
give them out for colds and it's like, no.
I
And
don't
then
disagree one bit,
you
but
you and then you build up an immunity and then it
yes,
doesn't work because they gave them out like candy and then when you really need it, it doesn't work. But I'm gonna shut up
that's
because I have
true.
a whole rant. I have a whole rant.
That is the absolute truth too. That you're not going to cure anything with those antibiotics when it comes to the cold or the flu or anything along
Mm.
those lines. But if you spend $45 or $50 copay and you come to see me, I better give you something in hand when you leave instead of saying you need to rest, take some over the counter stuff, eat some chicken noodle soup, and you'll be fine after 7 to 10 days. Or I'm going to give you the Z pack that's going to do absolutely nothing for you other than
Right.
in your mind make you feel better about yourself. And it's still going to take you 7 to 10 days to feel any better. And in fact, it's also going to um, increase the odds of your immune system not being receptive to antibiotics when you really need it later on. So,
I just thought of a brilliant thing. They need to create like a sugar pack
yeah,
that's like but
placebo.
yeah, they need to create like a sugar placebo. No, but they name it something that sounds like antibioticness. And that way when you're like, oh, when you had the placebo zariathan, and they're like, what's that? I'm like, oh, to cure everything, and it's really just sugar pills.
Hmm.
Done.
Until the tort system kicks in and then
Shh,
we
shh, shh.
sue
Don't burst my
for
bubble. Okay?
a
Don't burst my bubble.
$1 billion. So,
Don't burst my
yeah,
bubble.
right. I mean, listen, think about it. Every clinical trial, when they do the double blind studies and everything else, somebody's getting placebos.
Mm.
And
Oh
there's a
yeah.
certain amount of
mhm.
that population that is going to show improvement based on that placebo
Mhm.
effect.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But again, we don't like to do that in our society because we need them coming back. As therapists, we get to see this individual for a 50-minute session, bill them for an hour. You have X amount of patients a day. As a physician and a revolving door in an office,
Yeah.
in order to keep that business going, because it is a business, the sooner you get
Yeah.
them in, the sooner you get them out. Whatever they need, prescription wise, get them in, get them out, bill it, boom, done. And
Oh yeah.
it's sad, but it's true.
It
So,
is.
and prisons are
I've been on
revolving door as well. So,
yeah, no, I've been on the insurance billing side of the medical field. I've also been like frontline like MA or rad tech and stuff. So like seeing both, it's crazy. Or like just looking at my own bills from when I was hospitalized and it's like, "Oh, well, here's an ice pack." I'm like, "You charge me $100 for an ice pack?" Like,
mhm.
come on.
And again, I bring up all these points, but I have no solutions to anything. So I'm right
No,
along
you're
there with
supposed to
you.
come up with solutions right now, Bill. Come on.
I
Well,
wish I could, but You know,
I,
the only
I,
thing I can
I was
do is
talking
bring him to light.
I was talking to someone who's explaining that they were anti-police and they wanted the whole system to like police to be like sort of scrapped and start anew. And
Mhm.
then I was like, my son, if you want that to happen, you need to eliminate everything, politics, education
Right.
system, everything, and start from scratch, because everything is like sort of like connected to each
Mhm.
other somewhat, and it everything needs to sort of like be changed. So that's the difficulty sort of like with not, you know, being able to find a solution, because there isn't, unless we scrap everything and start anew, right?
Right.
And then even then we're gonna have, but the founding fathers wanted it this way, and founding fathers lived a long time ago. They don't know that, they're not dealing with the tech or
They
like the
had
same
wooden teeth.
problems.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The best
So
thing
you
that
know,
we
it's
could
not the
ever
same.
start would be a good dialogue and let
Right.
everybody in on it, whether they're educated or not, because it's a it's a societal problem. It's
Hmm.
people's problems, so they
Mm-hmm.
need to have buy-in to the solutions. But if
Mm-hmm.
you exclude them
Yes.
because we are more advanced in our degrees and everything else supposedly, then there's no buy-in to it, and it's I've heard a long time ago, and I believe it, that the higher the education of public is, the harder they are to govern,
Mm.
and nothing
Mm.
could be further from the truth. It's when you have a society that's not very well educated, they are much easier to govern because you can tell them what to do.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a sad state when it comes to the political spectrum, and when we politicize everything from capital punishment to abortion rights to legalization of drugs and everything else. It all falls on that political spectrum, and that's pretty sad.
It's
So,
so
so
true, though. It's so true.
but I kind of have like one last thing I want to talk about, but
No,
first, Boone, do you have
Wait.
any more
No.
questions?
No, Liz.
Why?
Don't
okay.
lie.
No.
Don't lie. Is this the real last one? She always does this. Is this the real last one?
That's the
That
thing
I've
about
written down.
when I was a college professor and I really wanted to get out of class. I'd be like, if there's no more questions that we can get, and there's always somebody sticking their hand out,
No,
itching. So go
no,
ahead.
Liz always has one last thing, and then it's like five last things.
Well,
Uh,
it's like a part B, C. You know,
Okay.
it's
So we have one last question in 27 parts. Okay, go ahead.
yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
So I hope you have 3 more hours because we're gonna be here for a
No.
while.
But yeah, Boone, do you have.
Yeah. Yes, you ask first.
So I wanted to kind of, so I love whistleblowing and just sharing information to dissect a system because people deserve to
Mhm.
know. So
Sure.
I'll parallel with what you were saying earlier about certain things. I used to be on the crisis team for the county, and you go out for suicide assessment, homicide, failure to care for themselves. And so um, it was a social worker role. At the same time, there were limitations to helping people receive or be at the right place of their life where they were have the insight to make decisions to change. And so it was very frustrating. You said revolving door. The revolving door system that I see when it comes to county mental health, I don't work there anymore. You guys can say whatever you want when you hear this stuff. So like it's such a revolving door system where you have someone struggling, they're at their end. They're at their end. They're at the limit where they feel like they want to harm themselves or someone else. And yet at the same time, we're sending them to a hospital to get some assessment or detain them for 3 days or something like that. Release them, especially if they're homeless. They're walking around. You can't find them. I tried my best to find the client. They are no longer on the caseload, and so you discharge them, and so that they come back on the docket a month later. Same thing's happening. So like systemically, the tax dollars are going nowhere. It was back in the day 10 years ago, really, 10 years ago, it was $9 a minute to interview these clients and get the information, do what we had to do, and then they got released. And so it's a waste of money. Nothing's happening. So if you were concerned about where
Mhm.
your money's going, want to share that these things are
Nowhere.
happening. I don't know how much it is per minute now because it's been a while.
I would think that it's way more expensive now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that we're facing the same crisis that we were back then. And that's the sad reality of it, because working in the community and in the courts that I do, um, I sympathize with you on that, because it's all paperwork.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
do this assessment, get this billable hour, make sure that this progress note's done. You chart it this way, and the simple fact is, this person is in crisis.
Hmm.
They want to harm themselves or someone else, and it's not up to me to determine, or shouldn't be up to me to determine if their perception is reality. Their perception is their reality,
Yes.
and that's good
Yeah.
enough for me. So the fact that they say I want to harm myself and I have a plan to do so, that should be that end of that conversation. There should be no more paperwork. There should be no more questioning. It's okay, what can we do to keep you from doing this? How can we help
Right.
you? Instead of how
Yeah.
can we bill you
Hmm.
and how long can we keep you?
Yep.
Whether it's a Baker Act or a Marchman Act, or however, whatever state wants to use the terminology, and and then release you after the 72-hour commitment to the same exact environment that you were in before, which was behind the bus stop in a shopping cart laying on the ground.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
it's
and I
it's
mean,
sad.
and that's kind of what we see later on. We see the whole, well, this person was in therapy, but didn't ended up shooting the school, ended up committing a crime. Why didn't the therapist do something about it? I'm like,
Yeah.
we don't
Right.
do magic. Like
Yeah.
we can't.
Right,
There's only so much we're able to do, and we only see them once a week. If
Hmm.
they decide to lie to us through the whole time,
right,
I mean, we can't
exactly,
do
and
anything.
they can
And
do
I was,
that. They,
yeah, and a lot
they're
of these,
they're they're I don't I could have my magic 8 ball there and shake it up and like, will this person commit an offense or harm themselves? Uh, Not likely today. Okay, you're good. So, but then the moment something goes wrong, it comes back on us. Like, you didn't see this. Well, what
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
supposed to see? It's blame. Everybody wants to blame everybody instead of taking accountability, and the
right.
Hmm.
accountability is the system as a whole,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's
Hmm.
what needs to change. But in order for our funders to give us the funding, we have to meet their magical words in certain reports in order to get
Hmm.
it. And that's wrong.
Which is dumb because nobody looked at them.
I need your personality type.
Am I that bad?
No, you're systemic. You think like me, but you're not. So like I need to know if you're my cousin or not. Like,
Well, we could be.
yeah.
So, however you answered it, just copy the same answers down for me.
You're gonna get an email soon, Bill, and it's
Nah.
gonna be
No, it's okay.
You can stalk me anytime you want. It's fine.
Okay. I'm just curious
um,
because your cognition is very curious to me because you talk so systemically and it's open ended. So for me, it's like, so the terminology for the Myers Briggs system, cognitive system, is like extroverted intuitive, it's open ended. Possibility gets bigger and bigger. I think like that. So I can tell you're my
Sure.
cousin.
Yes. See, I'll
Provoking
see you at the
insight and
next
thought.
family
Yeah.
reunion. When we see each other at the family reunion, have the test ready. And
No, this is back. I So the joke is like we're all having a work retreat, and I just keep adding people to this work retreat. And,
see,
and so when we get together for the work retreat, we're gonna do
there you
this.
go.
yes.
Okay.
Everybody's just gonna be like self care. No, everybody's just be taking personality tests,
Yes.
figuring out who
That-
we
It's
really
like,
are.
so this is Boone's hour for self care, and we all have to take the test for her.
I was gonna do like,
There's-
what kind of pizza are you?
Yes.
those BuzzFeed quizzes. Like,
So then let me enlighten your day on explaining how weird I really am when it comes to eating. So when I say that I've never had a salad in my entire life, I've never had that. I've never had fish. I've never had any condiments like mayonnaise, mustard, lettuce, pickles, ketchup. Nothing like that ever, 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 um, ever. Let me
like
think about that.
still to this
To
day.
this day, ever. So if you worked at Subway, you wouldn't have to be an artist to make my sandwich. It's meat and bread. That's it. No cheese, no anything. Cheese is for pizza only.
Oh.
So when I get a burger or a hot dog, it's plain, nothing on it. Well done, everything. So there, add that to your assessments.
Wait, 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 wait,
The-
wait, wait.
Goodness.
Is it a sensory thing?
I don't know. I've never had this stuff.
So it's like a perceived sensation thing, maybe.
I don't know. That's the question. You got to figure that one out.
I can't
Well,
figure it out. I'm not in your brain. And
the Korean in me is like really sad right now because I'm like, he's missing out on so much good food.
Probably, but I've never had it ever. No fish, no seafood, nothing like that. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy.
my uncle is like that. Uncle Vic, if you ever
See,
listen to the podcast, he's from Georgia. He loves his what he likes.
I like Uncle Vic already. See, we are related.
So when you come over, because Bill is actually local for me, so when
Yep.
you come over for my fancy dinner parties, and I'm gonna be like, oh, this is just a burger, but it's gonna be not a burger, and
Uh-oh.
you're gonna like it.
I will look at every single thing before I eat it. In
You should
fact,
have said anything. Now he knows.
No,
You
but
told
that's how I
him.
look. It's the trick because am I actually gonna do it and be a bad hostess and trick him, or am I gonna double trick him for the full thing?
Double
so
trick.
I'm not the kind of guy that would be very formal in the sense of I'll be like,
By by
what
by
is this
fancy
shit?
dinner party, I mean dress in your best horror movie shirt and come over.
I'll be like,
I was thinking, is it going to
your
be a
cooking
murder
looks
mystery?
horrible. I'm not going to eat it, but thanks.
Mm.
But I'll have this beer and popcorn.
Ah.
He's like, I brought my lunch.
Yeah.
I brought my own things.
So people would call us. We were in Ohio. They call us for dinner all the time at their. And my first question is, "What do you have?" And order me a pizza because the shit that you're making, I'm not eating. So, and
Fair
that's
enough.
everybody knew me that way, and
Hmm.
still does to this day.
My kiddos work that I work with, they love pizza. That's all I'm gonna say.
See, cheese pizza, can't go wrong.
Pizza, pizza.
Hmm.
Um, wait, I want to bring it back to my question.
Oh, you finally
Okay.
remembered?
No, no, I had it. I just I wanted Boom to say because otherwise I could take over the whole time. Okay, so one of the things that okay, so unfortunately I did not have time to read your book, but I like
Tell
binged
him.
all the interviews that you've done, and and your book is on my list to buy now,
Thank you.
which I was planning to do anyway, but then
Boone and
home
I did the
was like,
homework.
see, now you know why they're making fun of me.
And why you're
Anyway,
Dr. Gremlin.
yes.
See, Bill
uh,
even liked my Instagram post of me reading his book, okay?
See,
oh, oh, dang it. He's gonna unfollow me now. Wait,
yeah.
wait, um, so one of the things you mentioned a few times in your interviews was that that the less questions you asked, the more people tended to talk.
Yeah.
And then, so my question was like, okay, so what do you think was their actual level of vulnerability with you? Like, how vulnerable and open were they actually being with
In
you?
the
Or was it all sort of like chess, I guess, still?
so in the very beginning, you just assume that they're going to be lying about everything
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they do,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you just don't buy into it. You just accept it at the time. So,
Hmm.
if they want to sit there and brag about their murders and the cases and how well known they were and how tough they are or whatever, that, that's great. That's fine. You just listen, and you may or may not agree with them, but it doesn't matter. You just listen to them, and then you ask them, well, what makes you think that way, or why do you
Mm-hmm.
see yourself that way, and just get them to expand on it more and more. And they like to hear themselves talk, so silence is golden. If you can find yourself to sit across from them and just stare at them, they find that very uncomfortable, so they have to talk. And then they do, and then they start talking more and more and more. And then as you get more and more comfortable with them, then you start calling them out on their bullshit in a professional but unprofessional way,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do your homework. You find out, how can I be just as manipulative as them if I want to get certain answers from them.
Mm-hmm.
And Are they narcissistic? Are they going to exaggerate? Are they going to say so? You exaggerate the numbers. You know, if they were in on 5 murders, but you really have heard that they are good for 7 or 8 murders,
Right.
then you bring up, okay, I heard you're good for like 15, you
Mm.
know, and then right away, if they're like, absolutely, you know, at least that many, then the bells start going off your head that they are kind of exaggerating, and then you get more specific. Well, then where would they be? You know, and then you let them know, listen, I've been told that if you ever take a human life, you never forget anything about it. So if you've taken 15, give me some ideas, and then you start, you know, whittling it down from there.
Yeah, just because that kind of led me to start thinking about the other thing that I've heard you say quite often, which is that, and I've heard it several times too, that they want to be remembered in
Yes.
some way.
Mhm.
and and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about like why do they want to be remembered. And it kind of makes me think of like the kiddos at school. Sometimes when they're misbehaving, a lot of the times it's because they're just not getting enough attention at home, or they feel unsafe, or there's something that they need and nobody's paying attention, so they act out, and negative attention is better than no attention. So
Sure.
I just kind of wondering if it's something similar.
So for them, it's more about they just don't want to be forgotten, and
Mhm.
they want to leave their mark somehow on society. That's why you don't see very many suicides on death row, because they're
Right.
not afraid to kill anybody but themselves, and they want to leave this world, whether it's natural causes or by execution, uh, where people will still know them or talk about them. So that's why a lot of them send me their artwork and everything else, because they know at some point I'll probably publish the artwork or show it in a gallery or something along those lines, and
Mhm.
they want to be remembered that way, any way possible. So they just don't want to be forgotten, because you have to realize that typically the family has forgotten all about them or has disowned them, or you know, they're in different states or what have you. So the only person or people that they have is those on death row and whoever else is communicating with them. Sometimes it's just myself. So,
Right.
you know, if I check my emails tonight on the different servers, I probably have at least 15 emails that I haven't checked in probably a week, just because they'll call, they'll email, they'll write, they'll video chat. They're very, very needy, and you have to be able to step aside from it a lot of times just to regain your own composure.
I think a lot about sort of like the power of having a supportive community, um, just in general. And it makes me think of like when I heard your descriptions of like, the process of how you get invited to witness like these people's last moments. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, well, you said it now, like sometimes you're the only person that they can invite. Nobody else
Sure.
would show or come.
And it's you know, on one hand, it's sad because you're dealing with an individual at the end of their life, you know, when they are, you know, facing the actual death, because very few of us ever know exactly when and how we're going to die. These individuals know exactly when and how they're going to die, and they start to realize that the family's no longer in their lives or anything. So whomever I have out there, you know, that I can hold on to the very last minute, who will also maybe, hopefully, in their mind, write about me even after I'm gone. So I'm still in people's thoughts some way or the
Mhm.
other.
Hmm.
And so you find that a lot on death row, but it's typically the ones that haven't killed as many or are not as high profile, because the high profile ones, they have people writing them all the time, asking for
Right.
this, asking for that. And again, a lot of money on death row, a lot of money. So it's a huge hustle for them on death row, and yeah, it's just the way they survive.
That's
Okay, that's my
craziness.
last one. For reals this time.
For reals.
For reals. For reals.
All right. Well, Booney, do you have anything else or?
Let me look at my notes. Hold on.
Okay.
Um,
Wait, and then you need to come back again. So for when I read the book, I might have more questions.
Part one
Great.
of two. No,
No,
part
I,
one.
Yes.
Part one of nth.
Wait,
well,
because I
first,
did kind of.
I would be more than happy to be on your show anytime. Uh, and really, you do have my emails and Instagram and Facebook or whatever. If you have questions, I really promise you, I will reach back out and try to answer them. I'm not stuck up or anything like that. So
Oh no, yeah, he answered me like right away. I was like, oh, I'll hear back from him a couple days. It was like later that night. I was like,
yeah.
oh shit, okay.
That's great. Yeah, because I kind of heard that you are working on another book.
So I'm supposed to be working on a bunch of books. I'll be honest with you, I hate this writing stuff. Um, uh, what I'm working on right now is more in the film aspect.
Mm.
So I don't know if you've watched the documentary "Take Care of Maya." Um, it was number one on Netflix this past year. They filmed it down here in St. Pete.
really?
Mhm.
It was a 4 year uh, documentary that went on, and it went to number one. It's amazing documentary, and it's got nothing to do with death, crime, or anything like that, but
Right.
the hospital, the medical end of it, and Munchausen by proxy and things of that nature, and the
Mm.
misdiagnosis of it and things of that
Mhm.
nature. Well, Wise Fools Films, Caitlin Keating and Henry Roosevelt, um, they teamed up with me to collaborate on some stuff for Death Row and hopefully finding some bodies and um, bringing some closure to some families out there and maybe interviewing some people that survived serial killers and things like that. So that's what we're working more on right now, which I find much more enjoyable than writing because editors are not nice. So they
Mhm.
question everything.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I'll
I just want someone
eventually.
to like get everything that's in my brain and like write it down and
You need a
co-
scribe. You need a
coherent.
scribe.
Yes.
I would much rather put together like a coffee table book of some of the artwork because there's, like I said, thousands of pieces, and then
Yeah.
describe some of the people on death row that are behind it all. But then you
Some of the
realize,
stuff you showed at the talk was crazy. Like
yeah,
the
that's
the
just the tip of
hands. The
it. Yeah,
hands were so cool.
right. It, I'm telling you, I have some crazy stuff. So we'll see eventually.
Ah,
Was
sorry,
that
Boone. You good?
was that enough distraction for your note to look at your notes?
Yes. So it actually made me think of I'm scrapping my notes. My last comment to you is about archetypes. I have to throw
So
this
on
in
brand.
while I still have
So on
time with
brand.
you. So while learning and listening to your language, I will dub one of more powerful archetypes is really the messenger archetype, right? You're the disseminator of information. And for me, it's a very godly faith base of like you have faith and you're distilling faith to others that you know how to take this and you can run with it. So like you are the catalyst for so much systemic change. And I just wanted to make sure that you see that I see that in you. So thank you for being such a
Oh,
powerful messenger.
well, thank you. My goal is to always have people leave with more questions than answers, if that makes any
Hmm?
sense. I don't want to
Mhm.
feed anybody stuff that answers everything that they wanted answered, because again, you should question a lot of different things and people out there. Don't take my word for any of it. Everything that I give to you, find out more about it so you can make that educated opinion or decision on. So, yeah, I don't ever try to come across as knowing it all, but I know how to try to leave people with ways to ask more questions.
So AKA sequel bait for a second interview. Got
There you go.
it.
Sure.
uh, but yeah, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time because this has been phenomenal, honestly,
Yeah.
and I really do thank you so much for coming on and talking with us and getting And hopefully we ask some offhand questions that you're not used to and not the normal.
No,
Uh
it was great. I'll be honest with you. This is probably one of the best times I've had, and I'm not just saying that only because most people just want the gory details
Mm.
Mm.
of the death process and death row, and they want to hear about the victims and the offenders and things like that. And this one here was much more philosophical, much more geared on mental health and the systems in general, education wise, and all the above. So it was great. I can't believe we're on here almost 2 hours because it went so fast. I mean, I hope your listeners gain a lot from it because I know I have. So
God, well, I'm so happy to hear that. That makes me super happy. And like I said, I was so happy I went to your talk. I'm so happy I ran into you.
thanks.
Um, I will break your food stigma eventually.
That will
Um,
never happen, but okay.
that is my new life's goal is to get you to.
You're gonna live forever now, Hope.
Yes, exactly.
Couldn't do it.
It'll be on your deathbed, and I'll just be like, "It's okay. Eat this lettuce.
Just good
Oh,
Eat
Hope,
this
just
lettuce."
try it.
I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. Like
Wait,
people ask
oh,
me all
but
the
one thing.
time, you don't have any idea what you're missing, and I keep saying, well, I've never tried crack or heroin, and
Mm,
I'm certain if I
mm.
tried that, I'd probably like it too. But why start now? So I got that
Uh,
going for me.
Hmm.
I guess I
well,
don't have an addictive personality.
well, as
I'm-
as my dad would always say, no good story starts with "I ate a salad." So
Exactly right. Nobody says hold my salad.
fair enough. Fair enough. And,
Oh,
so, on that note, yeah, so definitely check out Bill Kimberlin's information. I'll have his Instagram and other things where you can get his book linked below. He's been fantastic.
Thanks.
Um, like, comment, subscribe on this video and our channel. If you go to the Patreon, you get early access and free goodies, other exclusive interviews, things like that. But also, every portion of our Patreon money does go to our nonprofit, the Psychology for Geeks nonprofit that helps get mental health awareness and techniques and everything else out there to the community. So definitely do that. It's only $1 a month. It's cheap to give people. Uh, and but yeah, again, thank you so much, Bill, for this. This has been fantastic, and yeah, I hope you would love to come back again. Maybe when one of your film or movie things comes out, we'll have to get an exclusive with you.
Absolutely. I'd be honored to. Seriously. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
You guys are
All
great.
right. Thanks. All right.
Thanks.
And with that, I have been your Sherpa into the Mind Brain with my lovely co hosts and guest. So good night, everybody.
bye.